Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Mr. YumYum, and today's video is a little different from my usual theme park updates. I put a lot of effort into filming and editing my videos, and I'm always trying to make them feel more professional and cinematic. Recently, a company called Dehancer reached out to me to ask to review their plugin, which was really exciting because I've always wanted to use the plugin, but was never in a position to afford it. What is Dehancer? Well, it's a film emulation plugin that allows you to give your videos film-like qualities such as grain, halation, bloom, and lots more. So I thought this would be a fun opportunity to do a little behind-the-scenes video of how I create my videos. I'm going to have a play around with Dehancer using DaVinci Resolve and come up with 4 different looks to see what Dehancer is capable of. I'll come back to Dehancer shortly, but first let me show you what I use to shoot my videos. I mainly use 2 cameras. My main camera is the Sony ZV-E10. It's a good entry-level vlogging camera which is relatively affordable, and the skill ceiling is quite high, so you can actually pull off some pretty impressive stuff with it. The lens I use is the Sony 18-105 f4 with optical steady shot. It's a great run and gun lens which I can use to get wide shots and also zoom in really far. It's got a power zoom on the side of the lens which is really handy, so I can zoom in and out without having to take my hand off the camera. The f4 aperture is really versatile too, and when I'm zoomed in it can create a really nice blurry background to separate the subject. The ZV-E10 comes with a nice small kit lens as well, an 18-50, which is super compact and makes the ZV-E10 extremely lightweight and portable. It's so small in fact that you can easily fit it in a small bag, or sometimes even in a pocket. I also use a small rig cage for the ZV-E10 which makes it a bit sturdier, and I can also attach things to the cage like a top handle, as well as my second camera, the DJI Osmo Pocket 3. This is a tiny little thing, and the reason I have 2 cameras is because the stabilization on the ZV-E10 isn't great, and sometimes I like to film and walk at the same time. The DJI Osmo Pocket 3 is a little gimbal, which is super versatile and handy for getting smooth shots. It's also really easy to carry around and pull out when you need to get a quick shot. So that's what I mainly use to film my videos. If the battery dies on either camera, I do sometimes bring a power bank as well, but if I don't have that with me, I use my iPhone 13 Pro as a last resort, but very rarely. My approach to recording is to get as much B-roll as possible, so having the equipment to quickly do this, while not mandatory, is very useful and saves a lot of time. Because when I visit theme parks or other locations, I'm usually on the move. I don't have too much time to stick around getting all the footage I need with one camera. I usually try to get wide shots and establishing shots with the DJI Osmo Pocket 3, and I get most of my other footage like B-roll and insert shots and footage where I need to zoom in with the ZV-E10. The B-roll is really important for the kinds of videos I make because I usually cover a wide range of topics, and it's helpful to always have something interesting to look at to cut into the video. Pacing is really important to me, and I like to keep things moving along by keeping the visual flow. If I didn't have enough B-roll, it would just be one continuous shot, which might get a bit boring to look at for too long. To record my audio, I use a Focusrite Scarlett Solo. It's a great little audio interface, and the reason I use this is because the preamp is much better than plugging in a USB mic to the computer, so this gives me much more clean audio. The audio interface came with a microphone as well as some headphones, and I also got a boom arm to put on the desk so I can easily record or re-record audio very fast. I use a MacBook Pro to edit, hooked up to a monitor on a stand, which I can easily adjust the height of. I also have an electric standing desk, which I can change from sitting mode to standing mode, which is really important when you're spending lots of time in front of the computer. You need to change your position so you don't get a sore neck or a sore back. So let's move along to the editing. Here I am in DaVinci Resolve, which is the editing software I use for all my videos. DaVinci is great because it's actually free, but they do have a paid studio version too, which is what I use. It's a one-off purchase with lifetime updates, which is much more affordable in the long run than subscribing to something like Adobe. It actually came with my little DaVinci editing interface, which is also really handy when I need to quickly edit audio or trim clips. So let's check out Dehancer. After you install Dehancer, you can easily find it in the color tab in DaVinci. You simply add a node and drag Dehancer across. As you can see, it's already applied a default look, and there's lots of options to customize. It looks pretty complex and in-depth at a first glance, so there's lots of room to get the look that you're thinking of. For the first look, what better opportunity to emulate film than going for a classic Hollywood vibe? I'm a big fan of all the qualities that film had back in the day, that classic Hollywood sort of look with the film grain obviously, the way that the colors behaved, and also how highlights appeared on film. There was a lot of bloom and halation, which is where the highlights of the image sort of glow. They kind of take on a slightly tinted hue, but it gives like this impression everything's glowing and magical, and I think that's why a lot of older films do feel a bit magical, is because there's like this innate magic to film. I dug out some footage I shot from Warner Brothers Movie World over the past couple of years during the Hooray for Hollywood event. I shot this footage on my Sony ZV-E10 in S-Log2, which is a picture profile that increases the amount of light information the camera can take in. At first you might be thinking it looks flat and low contrast, but it actually has a lot more information in the shadows and highlights than normal footage. And before I start working on the footage, I'll have to do a color space transform, which basically converts the S-Log2 footage into Rec 709, which is the standard color space in DaVinci Resolve. Dehancer does have its own inbuilt color space transform, with lots of presets for all kinds of cameras and picture profiles, but they don't have one for the ZV-E10. They do have one for some of the similar cameras like the ZV-1 and the a6500, but the color space transform doesn't quite fit well with my Sony ZV-E10 footage, so I prefer to use DaVinci's built-in color space transform. So I'll go ahead and create a few nodes. I usually like to create about 4 nodes, one for the clean look and some minor adjustments, another one to adjust the levels a bit more, like white balance and exposure, one for the color space transform, and then a final node for the look, which in this case will be created using Dehancer. Sometimes I add a few additional nodes depending on what I'm trying to achieve, like if I want to add a custom vignette or change the vibrancy or make specific changes to some colors. But generally speaking, this is how I approach my grades. First I'll tweak the white balance slightly, then I'll add color space transform. As you can see, our flat looking S-Log2 footage is much better now with more contrast and depth. Then I'll add Dehancer. So you can see now Dehancer has applied its default grade. And I'm not crazy about this look, so I'll go ahead and change the film type. I like this one. It does look a bit flat at first, so I'll change the print type and tweak some of the settings to get the look that I want. It's easy to get carried away with these things and overcook the footage, but I want to make it feel organic and natural so I don't push things too far. It takes a while to find the balance and can be challenging sometimes, but you just have to change things around until you get what you're going for. That's what's fun about color grading. There are some rules that you can follow, but generally speaking, there's a lot of freedom there to get the look that you're thinking of, and sometimes you're surprised by how the footage turns out. Next, I'll customize the film grain a bit, because it is a little bit intense at first, so I have to pull it back so it's not too egregious. There's all kinds of grains you can apply here. I personally like the 35mm look, and I set this to 500 ISO because that's the base ISO for S-Log2 on the ZV-E10, and I usually keep it relatively low, around like between 10 and 20. I think the default look applies at like 45 or something, which is pretty intense. Next, I'll add some bloom and halation, which is one of my favorite qualities from film footage. Especially in the golden age, you'll notice the highlights of the image are usually glowing slightly and make the actresses and actors look kind of magical and ethereal. Again, I don't want anything too crazy, so I'll just tweak the settings until I get the look that I'm going for. I can also add some behavior to the film grain, like film breath and film damage. I'll add a tiny bit of these, but again, I don't want it to look like it's actually bad or aged. So there you have it, there's our Hollywood style look. I can take a screenshot of this and apply it to other clips, and it will put all the same settings onto those clips, and then all I have to do is make some minor adjustments, tweak things here and there to keep the look consistent between each clip.
My business, humming a song. I'm happy by myself, not a care in the world. This is a life, just me, myself, and I.
For my next look, I'm going for something similar to that classic Hollywood vibe, but now for something more film noir inspired, something sort of moody and dark and mysterious. So to play around with this look, I found some footage of Catwoman at Movie World. I really liked this lighting, which was only there for a few minutes during golden hour. The light was hitting Catwoman and her costume in such an interesting way, I just had to race over and get a quick shot. I shot this in Cine 4, which is another picture profile. It does have a good dynamic range, but it doesn't require as much work in post to edit and tweak, and it's already a Rec 709 color space, so I don't have to do any color space conversions, so that takes out a node from the equation. I'll pick a cool desaturated film stock. A lot of people think that older movies were completely black and white, but often the film stocks actually had some slight color qualities, so sometimes the black might have a little tint, and the white would be slightly creamy rather than pure white. I want to do something subtle that isn't literally 100% desaturated. I like the look of this one. The idea for this look is to make Catwoman sort of blend into the shadows, but while retaining that interesting light, and without losing too much detail on her face. So I'll play around with the contrast, the blacks, the whites, the shadows and highlights. I'll also play around with the halation and bloom, and this time I'll increase the film grain and damage a bit. I like the grit and texture that it gives this particular look. I think there's a time and place for everything, and I think this kind of suits this style, the moody vibe. I also want to focus the frame in a little bit more on her. There's quite a bit of space around her, so I'll add some subtle vignette. Applying a vignette is a little bit of a slippery slope sometimes, because the idea of vignette is to draw the focus in on one part of the frame, but often the vignette looks very unnatural and actually draws the attention more to the sides of the frame. So I'll do a little subtle version of this. You can see how you can achieve a lot of different looks quite easily with Dehancer. It's nothing you couldn't do already, I guess, but the good thing about Dehancer is it takes out a lot of the work that would be involved with doing something like that without a plugin. I feel like it would take like 20 nodes and you would need to download all this film grain footage, and especially if you were trying to emulate a specific film stock, you would really have to like reference it heavily, and it's just a lot of work. So this saves a lot of time, and there is also a lot of room for customization. It is definitely a bit daunting for a beginner, but once you understand what each setting does, it becomes a lot easier, and the amount of options you have is really exciting. For the next look, I want to see if I can do something a little bit more extreme and creative, like trying to emulate an old Super 8 film reel. So for this one, I chose some shots of theme park rides I filmed that I've enjoyed, and I'll choose a film stock with a bit of a warm tint, and I'll lift the blacks a little bit. Back in the day, it was hard to know if you were exposing things properly, so I feel like a lot of the charm of Super 8 footage or home video footage is often to do with the imperfections that regular people wouldn't necessarily be aware of. They were just trying to film the events of their lives. They weren't trying to make a masterpiece movie. So I'll play around a little bit. I'll try to give it that authentic feel. Sometimes I might have to expose the footage incorrectly, crush the contrast a bit. I'll also use this film reel effect, which they have in Dehancer, that allows you to give the frame that kind of film reel look. There's lots of options to choose from, but I'll go for this Super 8 preset and tweak the settings a bit to get the kind of look that I'm going for. And for my final look, I chose some footage I filmed in Japan last year. I wanted to try and come up with a slightly more modern look, so I'll choose a film stock with a bit of cyan in the shadows, and I'll tweak the settings a bit to come up with something pretty subtle. So I'll play around with the settings a bit on Dehancer. The main goal is preserving the clarity and sharpness of the image, but also giving it some texture and a few unique qualities so it doesn't look like it's straight out of the camera. So as you can see, there's a lot you can achieve with Dehancer. I think it's fantastic. It's so much fun to use, especially when you want to give your videos something extra. And it's a great way to grade footage mostly in one node. I think it can be a little bit daunting and confusing, especially if you're not familiar with all the terms, and it does have a slight learning curve. I'm still figuring out how to use it myself, so don't take this video as the gospel or the definitive guide to Dehancer. It is quite an intensive plugin, so it can make playback in your timeline a little bit slower, but that's to be expected. Render times can also be a little bit longer than usual, but that's fine. Would I recommend it? Absolutely. I think if you're a content creator or a filmmaker or just enjoy filming and editing in general, it's definitely worth checking out. There's lots of options available on their website, and the plugins aren't limited to DaVinci. They also have ones for Final Cut Pro, Premiere Pro, and After Effects, and they've also got photo editing plugins for Photoshop and Lightroom, as well as a mobile app and a web-based editor too. And I do have a promo code. YumYum, which you can use at checkout to get 10% off your next purchase. So if you're interested, head along to www.dehancer.com. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you to Dehancer for reaching out. I'm so glad that you read my mind that I wanted to use your plugin. This was a little different than usual, but if you enjoyed, please feel free to leave a like, a friendly comment, or subscribe for more. And before we finish, I'd like to wrap things up by giving a very special thank you to the members and sponsors of Team YumYum for supporting my content. Thank you so much everyone for your very kind and generous support. It really means a lot to me that you enjoy my videos enough to support the channel in this way, and it helps me cover a lot of the costs associated with running the channel, so I really do appreciate it. A special thank you to the members, Randall, Maloney's Coasters, Kai on the Internet, Oogie Boogie, Theme Park Ogre, Jordan Casey, Johnny Boy 175, The Downy Cat, Carrie Jackin, and Movies Like Everyone. And a very special thank you to the Team YumYum sponsors, Koala75, Audrey Allen, Senpai's JP Blue Dog, Senpai's JP Red Dog, Wayne Hewitt, Lee Donald, SW Stevie 1, and The Kez. Thank you so much again everyone, and for anyone who would like to become a member or a sponsor, you're more than welcome to do so. This will give you access to new videos early, you also get a special shout out and thanks at the end of my videos, some emojis to use in the comments, a YumYum sticker next to your username, and last but not least you also get a custom illustrated character hand drawn by me to suit your very needs and requirements. And as an additional way to support the channel, I also have the Team YumYum sponsor available, which will give you access to all the perks included with the membership, and as an additional perk I'll also animate your custom character doing a little dance which will appear on screen, and it'll be super fun, super cool, and super cute. And for any of my members or sponsors who haven't told me what you would like your drawing to be yet, please feel free to let me know in the comments and I'll try and get something drawn up for you as soon as possible. I'm sorry for anyone whose drawings I haven't done yet. I'm pretty sure I've gotten everyone's requests so far, so if you could let me know what you would like, that would be awesome. Thank you. But if you're not in a position to support the channel by becoming a member or a sponsor, you're more than welcome to leave a like, a friendly comment, or subscribe for more. Thank you so much again for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.